Hi, I'm Mark Lopez and I'm inviting you to watch Pugad Bloggers, the show that tackles the latest issues in social media on DCRJ 8:10 a.m. Radyo Bandido TV.
Watch and listen to Pugad Bloggers, Monday to Friday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Airing on Sky Cable Channel 224 and on all DTT boxes. Simulcasting online on Facebook and YouTube. Listen and watch on your mobile devices. Just search DZRJ Radio Bandido.
Pugad Vloggers, ako raw titirisin, salot sa bayan wawalisin, walang sasantuhin, ang saya-saya nakakabaliw, kasama natin ang tropa. Pugad Vloggers, Pugad Vloggers.
Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. Very happy to be here tonight. Ako po si Orion Perez Dumdum at syempre nandito po tayo sa ating constitutional reform special, no? And as this is a special, we have a special guest. A very special guest nasa kanyang parang Japanese style home. How are you, Attorney Tony?
Okay lang, Orion. Thank you for having me.
Great. I'm glad to have you. It's a pleasure talaga to have you on board, Attorney Tony. So mga kababayan, itong si Attorney Tony Abad, isa po siyang corporate lawyer and international trade expert. No, marami siyang alam about yung mga how companies can set up businesses in the Philippines, yung mga how to set up yung mga trade agreements, etc., etc. And madalas siyang ginagawang resource person kapag may mga talks about mga international trade, anything about how to bring in investments in the Philippines, all these kinds of things, pati sa mga Senate hearing at saka congressional hearing, nasasama rin po siya. So for those of you who are yung talagang tinitingnan talaga ninyo itong topic ng constitutional reform, I'm very sure you would find him to be a very familiar face dahil si Attorney Tony Abad ay kilala po talaga when it comes to how to bring in more businesses in the Philippines, how to get corporations incorporated in the Philippines, etc., etc., and so forth. And marami po talaga siyang natutulungan. Matagal na siyang nasa technocrat din siya. Hindi lang siya lawyer lang. He's also a technocrat. So ayun. Tsaka maganda yung bahay niya. Medyo Japanese style ang bahay niya. Napunta ako niyan dati. Okay. Thanks for being here, Attorney Tony, and I'm really glad to have you kasi nga you are an acknowledged expert when it comes to yung mga international trade and investments, and you're also a member of the Foundation for Economic Freedom, no? So together with a lot of other people there, they're basically proponents of making it easier for businesses to come in and create jobs for Filipinos. So, may tanong ako, Attorney Tony, how did you get interested in yung constitutional reform in general? Kasi this is a topic that's not only about, trade and becoming open to foreign investments, but even the federalism and the parliamentary system part. Paano po kayo na interest dito?
Okay, salamat uli, Orion. I'll take everything you said about me as compliments. Well, it's true. I think Orion and I are really of a like mind tungkol dito sa constitutional reform. But let me give it some background. Medyo it will be my long answer, and after that we can talk a little more, no. Yung dalawang obsession ko as an economist/lawyer, no, yung dalawang obsession ko is poverty and wealth. So how to get rid of poverty and then how to create wealth. Siyempre gusto rin natin yumaman. At as a corporate lawyer, I want to have more clients, no. But we can only do that if you're up to the game, no, so to speak. Now, as an international trade lawyer, you get to see the rest of the world, and you get to compare economies, no? Like you do, Orion, no? You do this metric of following how are other economies doing. And like you, I also see that, and maybe I get very frustrated that other economies, even developing countries, even Asian countries like the Philippines, are able to do it, no? They get rid of poverty and then people get rich. So ang gusto nating lahat ng Pinoy mayaman. Yan ang gusto. That's as simple as that. Nobody's so hungry that they have to scavenge for food. Nobody's hungry and everyone has choices, no? Yung hindi kailangan mayaman na mayaman, but mayaman lang. Yung you're able to do everything that you want to do. So my start was really about trade and protectionism. Nakita ko yung mga protectionist countries ang hindi muunlad. Whereas those who connect with the rest of the world, and there are empirical studies to show that the more open your economy is, the faster you're able to get rid of poverty. Because when in an open economy, nakakaroon ng tinatawag na capital accumulation. And you'll see this happen in countries like China, Vietnam, no? Na within a short period of time, relatively, no, 10 to 20 years, no, wala na silang poverty. Wala yung mahihirap na katulad natin. So I said, okay, open economy. No? And to a certain extent, from the 1990s to the present time, we've been able to do that. No, open economy, join WTO, no, try to become a trading country, but we still can't seem to work it out. No. So the other thing that I found out as a former agent or advisor at the National Security Council during the time of President Ramos, yung malaking problema natin yung walang competition, no? Yung pagkawala ng competition at hawak ang economy ng mga monopolyo at mga kartel, no? So you have a very closed economy and it's controlled by monopolies and cartels. So national security at the time demanded that we open it up, no? So we opened up the economy, introduced competition policy, and I tried to push for a competition law which only passed in 2015. No? And still, no, parang kulang pa rin. No? Despite the competition law, despite being part of the WTO. And that's where it got me to seeing, baka it's the way we govern ourselves. No? It is to borrow your term, Orion, it's our operating system. No? Or our whole legal framework for how we interact with each other. And doon tayo napunta sa Constitution. It's how we're structured, no? Na bakit ganito? Presidential system, unitary, meaning it's not federal. So we're not able to spread the wealth, and at the same time, you concentrate too much power in one person, no? And that it becomes very dangerous. So no matter how good or mabait the winner of your election is, they're faced with this challenge of trying to run the country all by themselves, no? Because all the power, all the decision is concentrated in one person. And then naisip ko, what's the background of this? And the background of this is yung constitution natin ay base sa US colonial administration system. O ibalik, kinuha ni Quezon yung sistema na ginawa ng US, which is very centralized and which is really about colonial power, no? Colonial domination, and then turned it into our own. No? And then kunyari, meron tayong popular election, but actually what it turns into is another dictatorship. No? Parang siya yung governor general, yung president becomes the governor general, and all the decision is made in Manila. No? And that's why our constitution has actually worsened our condition, and yung ability natin, yung abilidad natin to be part of the trading system, the investment system, is held back, no? By all of these. That's why all of these I don't know, stupidity, irrational decisions, bad economic choices. It's all based on this presidential system of ours.
I was just going to
And-
interject,
Yes.
you're totally on point on that part where our system is essentially based on the colonial system that we had under the Americans. Kasi yung colonial system under the Americans was supposed to be very similar to how they govern their states. So parang but the way we were patterned was not based on the US per se, the federal, the big country US, but rather we were in a way patterned after one of the states in the US. And kaya nga yung style natin in the way our polities our subnational polities are set up is very much like how the states have their sub-state units set up. So our provinces were never meant to be the equivalent of the states in the US. They are actually, the provinces that we have are actually based on the counties in the states. And then that's why you have this concept, this weird concept of the independent, yung mga independent cities. So parang this city is supposed to be the capital of this county in the US, but when it becomes rich enough, it becomes totally separate. It goes, how do you say this? Reports straight to the state, no longer to the county to which it originally belonged. And that county actually becomes in many ways poorer because that rich city had left its jurisdiction and the county is now left as, okay, bahala ka na. You're now, parang yung mga provinces natin where like Cebu, for example, Cebu province, Cebu City is very rich and it is taken out of Cebu province. So that we got that actually from this parang style of like parang states.
Yeah. Well, the province and yung probinsya natin is not able to develop or evolve into something like a state, no?
It can't, yeah.
But parang ano lang siya. Actually, these are just departments, eh.
They're just departments
of the central power, no?
Yes. They were really meant to be just like the counties in the state. Within a state of, let's say, the state of Virginia, they have counties. And the counties will never become rich because whenever the richest city becomes rich enough, it becomes independent. So that county will never be able to partake of the economic gains of that city.
And if you will recall, there was a Philippine commission that was created, no? But it is like an advisory body to the Governor General.
Indeed.
Then they created a National Assembly so that they can again have it's more for implementation rather than
Policy making,
getting feedback. It's really the Governor General telling these assemblymen and the commissioners what to do.
Yes.
Diba? At the end of the day, the decision is always the Governor General's.
From the top, it was there's no parang collaborative feedback gaining mechanism, but it's just
top down. No?
It's a top down thing. Yeah, indeed.
So, ang kailangan natin, yung tunay na demokrasya, yung sinasabi, participatory democracy, no? Has to be from the bottom up. Has to be, based on consultation even at the community level. But we're not structured that way. See, and that's where we're at, Orion, no? Yung ating battle, yung ating war,
Exactly.
Trying to come up with a truly democratic state, or truly democratic nation, can only be done if we really overhaul the system, turn it on its head, so to speak. And then what will happen is every 6 years, the temptation to go after that 13 trillion or 14 trillion pesos budget, turn it into confidential funds or whatever unaccountable means of expenditure, it's crazy. That's why what happens is walang accountability. So executive heads are always able to act with impunity. And what you want is really a system where every expense is actually accounted for, is actually debated, is actually considered by communities and by representatives. And then this is why the parliamentary system, or the parliamentary in its essence, is actually a better way of implementing democracy, no? Because
Indeed.
it's like a town hall, eh. Pag
Mhm.
nagkaroon ng assembly, may town hall yan. And if the assembly is the one that selects the leaders, they're vetted, no? So,
Yes.
ang lumalabas na nagiging executive head is actually selected by the people's representatives, no? When you go for a popularity contest, like yung ginagawa natin, you'll get somebody who will conform to a popularity contest rather than a vetting for an executive job.
Parang nagiging cosmetic yung basis paminsan eh. It's surface ideals, cosmetic, what's the impression that people have of the person from media, but that's not necessarily reflective of actual competence in governance, no? So, yun ang problema natin.
Malayo yung the relationship between the voter and the person being voted in is so far. Yeah, you can only rely on first impressions. O mabait to, magaling siya, di ba?
Mukhang magaling, di ba? Mukhang magaling. Magaling naman siguro.
Mukhang mabait si ano, or he must have he came out in this movie, so he must be good, no?
So, wala yung parang actual work experience with the person, which is like in organizations, you will be working in groups, and you've worked with the different people, so nakikita mo sino yung magaling, kaya your basis for choosing who will be the leader is the work experience you've had with the different people, and you see this person seems to have the leadership capabilities that we require. So,
And you
ganon.
mentioned organization, Orion. So
Yeah.
imagine an enterprise, a large conglomerate that's trying to manage this nation with a 13 or 14 trillion budget, no? So corporation yun, di ba? When you design your government, you should imagine a large corporation trying to implement all these programs simultaneously. Or who do you select to be the head, or di ba, the executive committee and the chief executive of this enterprise? And certainly you don't elect a corporation's president by popularity contest.
No. That's a surefire way to lose money.
Diba?
Yeah.
So if you're gonna do that for a corporation, why not for the government of a big nation like the Philippines?
Indeed. I've read before of these commentaries where people have essentially compared or basically likened the parliamentary system to the corporate style system. No? Parang it's the closest thing that a government can have to how a corporation is run, whereas a presidential system is not like that. So, yun yung problema natin. That's why we're having a hard time.
If you had a corporation running your country, your assembly or your representatives actually is like your stockholders, no?
Yes, indeed.
And then they should select or elect a board of directors. And from that board of directors, that's where you get your chief executive.
Indeed. Yun nga eh.
And every step of the way, of course, you have to be accountable to your shareholders, no? That's the ano. Imagine every Filipino having a share, no, of the corporation, no? So
Exactly. Yun nga eh. Sayang talaga, no? Kasi parang this is something that's been floated as an idea or a series of ideas since the 1990s. And I'm very sure you were already involved in that as part of the Ramos administration back then, no? The 1990s. So, I mean, really, what else can we do? We've tried everything. I guess social media is helping a lot, no? Because mass media for the longest time has somehow, for some weird reason, been obstructionist against these necessary reforms. Now, what do you think? What else can we do to push this forward?
well, you have to start small, and you have to start where where everybody is. And like you said, social media, mass media is probably where the change of opinion can happen. But people have to realize that maybe what they should look at is the lesson of the pandemic. How at first we got isolated and all we had was our community. So imagine if your world was only your community. How do you want that community to be governed? Because here you can actually have direct elections or direct democracy, because you have a say in how your money is bought, how the clinic is set up, the medicines, the peace and order of your community. Then try to think of it as building on that community up to the time you create a nation. And well, of course, you have to also consider federalism, because it's a practical approach to managing large sections of your corporation. Your corporation, would have these big subsidiaries.
Subsidiaries, indeed, yes.
Running, but then at least they'd be able to make decisions, let's say in Mindanao, at a faster pace than what would happen if you have to keep coming back to Manila to beg for more funding or to make decisions about things that happen in Mindanao or in the Visayas.
Yeah, indeed.
That's where the logic of federalism comes in. Well, the other one is, aside from mass media, social media, and the individual, it's really about the regions really thinking about how do they want to go about this in the future. The idea of federalism was floated. So where do you go from here? Why don't you form your assembly, your shadow assembly, your parliaments, and envision how you'd want to function as a state within a federated Philippines. That's also where the movement can be taken, and then always to make this the need for the future to be addressed by the future leaders. That when we consider future leaders, they have to look at the system, and that the system has to change. And the other thing is, what I'm studying now is, well, artificial intelligence as an example of the technological advancement of the day. And technology always requires that humanity responds with, a change in how we do things on an everyday basis. So in a government or a nation driven by artificial intelligence, is this really the setup that we want? Don't we want more direct say in how governance is done? Don't we want more transparency, since technology will now afford it? Diba?
Yeah.
Before, we were so dependent on our elected representatives, and we took whatever they said, on faith. But now we have a more direct line to where things happen because of media, because of and then, well, artificial intelligence will now free us to do more human things, rather than the sort of the mechanical things that we do.
The drudgery work, yung mga ganun. Yeah.
So it makes us think, it makes us become more creative. So we have to have a structure, a system that allows us to be more creative. Certainly, you can't stick to an old system just because that's the way it's always been done. We have to go forward. We have to change everything, the way we do things. And that's where the hope lies, I think.
Yeah. I'm just curious also, because I remember, that in 1992, that was when the late President Ramos became president, and that was also the year. I think it was sometime in November when the late founding Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, came over to the Philippines to do his. He was invited by the Philippine Business Conference, and that's the speech where everybody remembers him for having said that democracy is not necessary for development, but it's more discipline and other stuff. But that was also the same speech where he also basically talked a lot about the need for bringing in foreign investors, and he also mentioned the problems of the American system, so the American separation of powers system. No? So he mentioned those two things, those two main things. He didn't mention much about federalism because Singapore doesn't have an experience with federalism within themselves. They had an experience as a member of a federation when they were in Malaysia, but as a country itself, they don't have federalism inside. But he did talk about opening up to foreign investors and replacing or not using the American system, which doesn't seem to be very good. And I'm wondering if in your experience with the Ramos administration, was it possibly the result of some of these inputs coming from that speech that led to the advocacy that became, let's make changes to the constitution, etc., etc.
Well, with Ramos, I think, of course, definitely that Philippine Business Forum commentary of Lee Kuan Yew had an impact, because from there we actually took that as a cue to liberalize the telecommunications sector, and so this is the beginning of implementation of some competition policy. The open economy plus people empowerment, that was the concept of globalization plus people empowerment. And to that extent, it really drove and inspired Ramos to push for more openness, more integration with the region, with ASEAN, and with capital base, the investor base. The problem is that on the political front, or the political structure front, I think he was still trying to make sense of the system that he had inherited as a new president. And it wasn't until later, in the term, that he realized that we had to the Constitution. In a later interview, maybe this was about 2016, he said that we should have a parliamentary system. He actually endorsed it, for many different and logical reasons. But at that time, it was the problem with having this single 6-year term that ended up becoming a problem. It's because it's a wrong solution to a problem, and it ended up becoming a limitation on the momentum that the Ramos reform program had already created, but fell short of. That's why he wanted to have an amendment so that we could extend the term, or at least continue, maybe in a parliamentary system, continue with the programs that he had started. Unfortunately, it was just too late, and I think we still suffer from this paranoia, that any attempt to, and it's been our problem, diba? Any attempt to amend or even discuss the amendment of the Constitution is some kind of evil conspiracy to put in a dictatorship again. And ironically, look where we're at now, no?
Mass media, I felt very sad back then because mass media was really so adamantly against it. They were always demonizing the moves, and then there was no attempt to even consider the logical, the rational, the benefits, and what are the clear advantages, doing a pros and cons, and just looking at them. I couldn't see any of that being done at all. And at that early stage, even though I was still in university back then, and I really felt that this is such a waste of time, because very clearly at that point in time I could already see that many of the countries using presidential systems are the ones that are not doing very well. And that was very obvious. And then the only one that seems to be doing well is the US. And I said, why is that? And then it turns out the US, why it's doing well, I found, well, it's because they have a quasi-parliamentary system in the form of their electoral college, which kind of lessens the impact of the overpopularity aspect of things. They end up having a two-party system because of the electoral college. So it kind of mitigates the problems that systems in Latin America would normally have, or in Africa. So sayang lang eh.
Definitely, Filipinos don't understand the U.S. system. I've taught this also and lectured on it, and it's based on the evolution from the Constitutional Convention, no, back in 1778.
Founding fathers.
Oh, in founding father.
Yeah.
There's a logic to it, but actually driven by stakeholders, or it was the landed class at the time, no, that designed that program. But as you pointed out, it's completely different from what we have. No?
Indeed.
First of all, it's federal, no, and the federation is a very strong federation. In fact, they fought a civil war over that federation and the definition of the relationship between the state and the federal power. No? And the selection of presidents is very different. No? The system of primaries plus an electoral college, definitely not the same popularity contest that we think. No, it's what Pinoys have grown to think is that the definition of democracy. No? Nakaboto ako, so I must be in a democracy, no? But
what's funny what's funny is many Filipinos don't realize that actually our system, rather than being, with so many of the tweaks and all these changes that were done to it, it now actually resembles more a Latin American system, particularly Mexican, because in Mexico they also have a single 6-year term for the president, and they also have the same kinds of two terms only, 6 years each for senators, and very similar, term limits. Which there was another Latin American political scientist had he had commented on this. He had written a dissertation about this, where these term limits actually created more dynasties. So that's Pablo Cherubin. He's from Colombia, and he not the university, but the country, the Latin American country, Colombia. And he said, in the Philippines, he studied the Philippines because he wanted to gain insights on how things work also in Latin America. And he said it's even worse in the Philippines because the term limits have caused the proliferation of dynasties. Because in the past, when there were no term limits, the whoever is the incumbent would just continue on as long as he's doing a good job. He continues on, and then the only time that a family member joins in is when that person retires. But what happened in the Philippines is, because there's a forced, I think after 9 years now, after three 3-year terms, you have to step down, and there's always going to be these unfinished projects and all that. So they want to keep it they want to have that so-called continuity. They let someone else from the same family handle it, and that's why they ended up with more dynasties. In fact, those dynasties that used to be thin dynasties, they became fat dynasties. So it just became worse because of this decision to have term limits. Grabe talaga.
I think the Philippines and maybe the rest of Latin America suffered this hangover from our colonial period. And what happened was the powers that took over, the Quezons or maybe the Bolivars, saw that it was probably more convenient to just take over the colonial administration structure. And I think the populists also were lazy and allowed, left it to these mini dictators to continue on. And because of that lack of transparency, lack of accountability, expenditure is not is not dissected in the way it is in a parliament. No?
Mhm.
And that leads to this great temptation to maintain the family enterprise. If your livelihood and wealth depends nga on this sort of presidential way of being elected, whether it's into local government or national government, then you have to protect it by maintaining a dynasty. Meaning it's a family enterprise. So you have to make sure that somebody else within your bloodline as can take over the opportunity to use the budget. Huh? Because we don't have a way of really taking the budget apart. It's not like parliaments where the prime minister is on the spot, where the finance minister has to answer to this assembly.
Indeed, indeed.
And that, I think, leads to that great temptation to maintain the family enterprise. It leads to dynasties, and then term limits. Well, what happens is these family enterprises just find ways to take
To
advantage
go around, to go around these so-called restrictions.
until it's too late, and they're going to put up a big fight if you're going to try and change that system. You're-
Grabe nga. I recall the there was a proposal back then when they were thinking, okay, look, it's probably a bit of a hard sell to do parliamentary immediately. So maybe what we can do first is let's start off with, okay, let's just remove the term limits first, because the term limits have been proven to create more damage than good. So let's roll that back first, and then maybe later on we can incrementally change that. And this is something that was being thought about several years ago, as an alternative, because they were feeling at that point in time, maybe people still don't understand how a parliamentary system works. Maybe, okay, let's just continue on with what we have, but maybe let's roll it back to how things were before we had term limits. Maybe we do away with the term limits because the term limits have caused more damage than good. But again, even that was demonized by mass media. So, ay nako, that's why we're doing this here. I mean, this actually goes into mainstream media as well, because we have radio and TV. But and we're lucky to basically have this platform, because this is essentially alternative views, things that you won't get in the normal TV airwave channels,
So I don't know. What do you think is the future going to be like?
I don't know. I really think that we need to just continue spreading the word, and that's really what it is. It's all about. Parang it's educating and informing and educating and enlightening as many Filipinos as possible, because much of what I notice, whenever we see resistance and parang people trying to go against reforms, being obstructionist against reforms, a lot of it seems to stem from a misunderstanding of what the reforms are all about, because there's just been so much misinformation.
Yeah.
So as long as we can find ways to spread the word about these reforms, why the reforms are necessary, what's wrong with the current system, etc., then I think we will eventually inch our way towards being able to get the reforms adopted.
Well, I'm not totally pessimistic. I like to think that as human beings, we evolve. No, we're part of an evolutionary process, and technology is also evolving. So things change. No, our media platforms, our means of communication, transportation, manufacturing, things change. And eventually, there'll be another generation of young people who start thinking the same way we do, that, we have to change also. And that means we have to really take a long, hard look at our system, what's our operating system? What platform are we working under? And why is it not, why are we not reaping the benefits of this new technology? So somewhere along the way, I think somebody or some group of younger people will suddenly break the mold, no, break the box, so to speak.
I think now what's happening is partly, we have the phenomenon of now there's just really so many Filipinos in the diaspora. So there's a lot of Filipinos working abroad. A lot of us here in Singapore, a lot of others who have emigrated to basically Commonwealth countries, so Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and even the US or wherever else, no, and in Europe, no, and I think maybe their presence there in these countries using alternative systems and alternative economic policies, which are like being much more open, they're able to see that these actually work, that these alternative economic strategies of being more open to foreign investors, for example, they can see that this actually reaps more benefits. We're actually taking advantage of this. We're benefiting from more economic activity because there are more foreign investors coming into these different countries, and then they also live in countries that use parliamentary systems. They see how it works. So whenever, for example, we talk about this, we get a lot of likes, we get a lot of affirmations from OFWs who are actually in these kinds of countries. And I think partly the fact that that these people will of course be inspired to share their knowledge or share their experiences with their friends and family can actually help in helping to spread the word, no? So that I think that might be partly an advantage that we should take.
Okay, my thesis is that we're evolving into literally an integrated world, no? You mentioned the diaspora, people moving here and there, no? And I know it's not just Filipinos, but all different races are moving around the planet at a faster pace. Then you have this phenomenon of accelerated technology through artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence doesn't make these distinctions. Maybe it carries some bias from their coders, no? But otherwise, artificial intelligence is just trying to link with other machines, no? And complete the sort of the product cycle, the supply chain. I think AI would rather see an integrated world from an economic point of view. And the practical impact of that is that we will also be interacting globally at a faster pace. And maybe the whole concept of national governance starts becoming questionable, that or irrelevant, no? And we might have to start considering regional or even international or multilateral governance, and talk about how all races and all people, if you're talking about a truly inclusive world, should have access to the same amount of water and food and clothing and shelter, and be allowed to make choices, no? Choices about religion, choices about sexual preference, choices about career and what to do, and creating artwork or inventions. But in a world where it shouldn't matter whether you're in the Philippines or you're in Canada, you should be able to do all of these things wherever you find yourself. But that means implication there is that we have to take a long, hard look at how we're governing ourselves, and maybe even the ones that work, the governments that work, will start considering also that they have to also function in a borderless world, no? A world integrated.
Grabe. I just feel bad then looking at how other countries in the region are moving fast, particularly Vietnam. No? Vietnam, all because of this the 𝗕𝗹𝗴𝗴𝗲 reforms they did in 1986, which was pretty much the same year that we ended up with, when the 1987 constitution was crafted, was in 1986. I think they finished it sometime in late 1986, and then it was ratified in 1987. That's why it's called the 1987 Constitution. But it was crafted in 1986. And 𝗕𝗏𝗧 in the 𝗕𝗏𝗧 reforms in Vietnam were set up in 1986. And that was the time when they decided they wanted to open up. They wanted to become capitalist. They wanted to do what Deng Xiaoping in China did. Let's do the same thing. And Deng Xiaoping in China, basically, he was just doing what Singapore did, with what Lee Kuan Yew did, which is bring in the foreign investors. And so Vietnam has just been consistent in that path. And now they're reaping all the benefits. They're actually doing quite a good job in their soaring up to towards development. No? So they're doing they've surpassed us already in terms of GDP per capita. So obviously, I think that's the wake up call that we should have awakened ourselves to, diba? Parang, come on, guys, they did this at the same time that we did this. We took the wrong turn. They did the right turn. Maybe it's time for us to do the same thing they're doing.
Well, before I comment on Vietnam, which I've been studying also as well, I need to I have to address a possible power outage.
Oh,
here.
okay.
Give me a second.
Sure, no problem, no problem. Yeah. So, guys, just to do commentary while our guest is fixing his computer system. Yung importante po talaga itong natin, yung aayusin natin yung sistema natin kasi napag-iiwanan na talaga tayo eh. Kita niyo na nga, 'di ba, na itong Vietnam, meron silang ginawang tama para dumami ang mga foreign investors sa kanila, dumami ang mga trabaho. Tayo naman, nagkaroon tayo ng konstitusyon na pinagbabawalan parang pinapahirapan, hindi naman sa pinagbabawalan, pero pinapahirapan natin yung pagpasok ng foreign investors dahil dun sa 60-40 at ibang mga anti-foreign direct investment restrictions na nasa loob ng 1987 Constitution. Sabay nangyari yun. That was 1986. Vietnam decided to become more capitalist and more open to foreign investors. 1986 was when we created the 1987 Constitution, which unfortunately became the reason why we're not able to bring in as many foreign investors as possible. And we also have, unfortunately, our not so good system of governance. Okay, here we're back with our very special guest, Attorney Tony Abad. So, Attorney Tony, thanks again for being here. So, you wanted to continue on with what you were saying just now?
Yes, I back in 2015, I was involved in a project to assist the National Assembly of Vietnam, and essentially they said that with their membership in the ASEAN Economic Community, and I think by implication also other regional trading arrangements or free trade areas that they're becoming a part of, they wanted to overhaul all their laws.
Wow.
That means they're not obsessed, or they're not fooling themselves into thinking that laws that they have been using for generations cannot be subject of change. No. The problem with us is sometimes we fall in love with with systems and laws, and we insist on keeping them in place. But for them, they said, we need to be part of this global system, this regional system. So our laws have to work so that our citizens can participate in this whole trading system. And I think maybe what advantage China and Vietnam had over us is that they didn't have established dynasties that controlled the means of production.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
So you didn't have these vested interests. Well, aside from their own political party, the Communist Party, but the Communist Party also is looking at this as a war, that they're waging war to gain wealth and to become a very powerful and strong nation. And I think both China under Deng Xiaoping and the Vietnam 𝗕𝗏𝗧 leaders saw this, and they see, and I think this is a different viewpoint, and my own analysis, that they see each citizen, each Vietnamese, each Chinese as an asset. No? And that's why one of their overall or overwhelming, maybe their top priorities is really to make sure that there are no poor, there are no sick Vietnamese. And
Wow. And they educate them well too. So
and they educate them well. And there's, despite being a country at war not too long ago, it's one of the most peaceful countries in the world today. But that's all part of how you look at your population and how you want to leverage the connection with the rest of the world as a means of alleviating that poverty. I think somewhere there was a wise guy or a wise group of men who realized that capital accumulation through foreign direct investment was the way to alleviate poverty, to eradicate it. And it's been proven time and again. Every generation of these NICs, these newly industrializing countries, created a strategy of export leadership by capitalizing that export leadership through foreign direct investment. Whether it's Japan, we think that Japan capitalized itself, but it's not true. Diba?
Yeah, that's true.
They also used FDI. Korea also used FDI. Taiwan, then China, then you have now Vietnam, and then the rest of ASEAN. Philippines is the only one that thinks that
oh, you're the only ones thinking differently. And it's weird because if you think about it, even in Europe, one of the success stories in Europe is Ireland. And Ireland also followed that same path of bringing in foreign direct investors. And so that's why they ended up being called the Celtic Tiger, because their pattern of economic development was very similar to particularly Singapore. It was very Singapore style, bringing in foreign direct investors. They were really learning a lot from how Lee Kuan Yew did what he did. And that's why they're even, in terms of per capita income, per capita GDP, Ireland is even richer than its former colonizer, the Great Britain, the UK. So, we could learn from this.
Yeah, these countries have learned to get rid of any little baggage they have, no?
Yeah.
Problema, ang Pilipinas, maraming bagahe.
Maraming bagahe.
We have a lot of baggage, no? Because we've really engendered this very powerful group of vested interests, no? And it changes, no, over time, no? Whether it's Spanish, American, Japanese, then
the local oligarchs. The local
oligarchs will always try to hold us back. But openness and integration with the rest of the world, and then the competition that comes with it, will straighten them out. But then you really have to give up the systems, the restrictions that were holding us back. But if that you're looking for the reason why Vietnam and China have been able to move forward, or Ireland and Singapore, is because they got rid of baggage. Or they didn't have the same kind of baggage to deal with. So, for example, Singapore, at that point in time when they were feeling really lonely and hopeless, now in the 1960s, what better chance did they have than to just open up and become an entrepot, a free port for the rest of the world? Or Ireland, with its small population, also said, well, let's just go global and see where it takes us. No?
Indeed.
And then that just because they're small countries doesn't mean that they're the only ones who can take advantage of it. China, like it's billions of people, and Vietnam with almost 100 million like us, also benefited from this openness. No?
Indeed. I think that's the part where we bring in the federalism part, because at least for the Philippines, when a lot of people say, well, we can't learn from Singapore because Singapore is small and we are a big country. And then I tell them, hey, wait a minute. China did the same. China basically copied from Singapore, which is also very small, and China is very big. So The difference was China decided to, in a way, quasi-federalize because they were able to make their different provinces autonomous of each other in economic decision making, and then each of these provinces would have X number of special economic zones. So, parang they were all told they were given the onus to bring in as many investors as you can into your provinces. Never mind that they're foreign, as long as they create jobs, let them come in. And if we can do the same in the Philippines, no?
And each province in China is actually like a big
Like a
country.
country, it is. Yeah, exactly.
And it's really this paranoia about the foreign direct investment. I also try to point out that 60-40 is not going to prevent what you fear. You're fearing that foreigners will take over or something like that. This sort of kind of nonsensical reasoning for 60-40. But all 60-40 does is it keeps investors out. I like to point out that capital doesn't have a nationality. Capital just creates more value.
Indeed.
So I think that's where Vietnamese and Chinese and Irish and display a whole lot more intelligence than we have. Because we're here, we're thinking it's so logical, but our leaders, whether business or government, just don't see it.
Do you think it could be that we need to reach, maybe the oligarchs themselves need to be enlightened? Because I think they don't realize that they, as oligarchs, they can actually still become richer when this new system comes up. I mean, they'll need to work more, but sky's the limit now when it comes to their ability to build up their wealth. They are already entrenched right now anyway, so they already have a head start. So
they have a built-in advantage already.
They have exactly.
And that's why tycoon to tycoon, it's still the tycoons in a global economy that will trump
indeed
anybody in a closed economy. But of course, the closed economy people will fight tooth and nail to make sure that the means by which they create their wealth is preserved. Even if the world changes.
Anyway, Attorney Tony, I wanted to thank you. I think we're very much towards the very end of our time. Would you have any final words that you'd like to share to our distinguished audience?
Well, I think you and I, Orion, are preaching not to to our generation or the older, but we're preaching and maybe reaching out to the younger, to actually allow yourselves to think of a completely different reality. And that's where leadership comes in, and leadership is inherently dangerous, as Ronald Heifetz points out, because true leadership requires that you change the status quo for the greater population, for the greater good. So somewhere out there, somebody listening to this Pugad bloggers, hopefully will take that germ of the idea and look at the substantial and fundamental change of our legal and political system as a means of becoming part of this new world driven by AI, driven by technology, and use that to wipe out all the poverty and to create 150 million rich Filipinos. That's the
very nice. Cool. Thank you very much for that great message, Attorney Tony. Sa ating mga kababayan, maraming salamat sa inyong pagsubaybay sa ating programa ngayon. Next week, nandito po ako ulit at obviously pinag-uusapan talaga natin ang mga reforma. So guys, thanks again for being here with us at Pugad Bloggers. And once again, I wanted to thank our very distinguished guest, Attorney Tony Abad. Thanks for being here with us.
Maraming salamat, Orion. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Vloggers, Pugad Vloggers.